Alien girl reads human romance novel, asks nervously, "What is spanking?" Kalen shifted on the cool, unforgiving durasteel of his cell, the synthetic fibered blanket, doing little to ward off the atmospheric chill of the ether citadel. It wasn't a cell, not really, more like a biocontainment unit, designed to study, not punish. Still, it was a cage. Across from him, behind a shimmering, translucent barrier, sat Zelira, a being of impossible grace and alien formality. Her skin, usually a muted, pearlescent white, shimmered with faint, almost imperceptible gold and violet ripples beneath the holographic display she was intently studying. She was the one assigned to him, the biological anomaly, whose derelict scout ship had crashed through their upper atmosphere, depositing him like a forgotten, inconvenient package. Her multifaceted ocular arrays, usually so still, were now fixated on the words scrolling across the screen, her delicate six-fingered hand occasionally making a small, dismissive gesture. Kalen had no idea what she was reading, but it had held her rapt for the last standard cycle. He'd tried to sleep, then to meditate, then just to stare at the wall, but her focused intensity drew his attention. Finally, a small melodic sigh escaped her throat vent, and she looked up, her gaze sweeping over him with an unnerving precision. "Human," she began, her voice a series of modulated harmonics that vibrated through the chamber. "This human romance novel artifact, retrieved from your vessel, is perplexing." Kalen grunted, a cynical smile playing on his lips. Yeah, they tend to do that. He'd forgotten it was even in the crash pod, a relic from a brief, forgotten shore leave, full of drama and terrible life choices, usually. Zelira ignored his jibe, her attention returning to the display. It describes a peculiar physical interaction. A spanking. What is spanking? The word, uttered in her formal, analytical tone, hung in the sterile air, absurd and out of place. Kalen choked on a laugh. "You're kidding me." He ran a hand through his perpetually messy brown hair. Well, it's a disciplinary measure, usually for children. Sometimes, in those novels, it's a form of erotic play." Zelira's head tilted, the crystalline growths along her spine seeming to catch the light. "Erotic play? With disciplinary origins?" She sounded genuinely confused, a flicker of something almost like dismay crossing her intricate features. The emotional data points are highly contradictory. "Welcome to humanity," Kalen muttered, pulling his blanket higher. "We're a messy species. You Syrinx wouldn't get it. You're all about logic and emotional restraint." Zelira's gaze sharpened, her iridescent skin flaring a quick, almost imperceptible cerulean. "Our emotional restraint, as you term it, is a foundation of our societal stability. Your messiness is precisely why you are considered an anomaly requiring rigorous assessment, and why I am tasked with this observation." The Elder Council, a shadowy collective of Syrinx elders whose voices carried the weight of ancestral recognition and millennia of tradition, had convened. Kalen felt their psychic probing, a cold, insistent pressure against his mind. Even through the containment field, Zelira's presence, however, was a faint shield, her own disciplined thoughts creating a barrier. They weren't judging him. They were judging her ability to manage this unprecedented anomaly. He learned later that the council had decreed his continued existence in the ether citadel was untenable. He was an impurity, a resonator of chaos, his very presence threatening the delicate resonance balance of their floating city. But direct execution was considered crude, barbaric, and a violation of a rarely invoked preservation edict concerning sentient life. So, instead, he was to be studied, his unregulated emotional patterns meticulously catalogued by Zelira before a final, ritualistic disposition. This meant daily, intrusive observation sessions, often involving painful neural probes that Zelira herself had to operate. She always approached it with ritualistic precision, her face a mask of serene discipline, her voice a formal monotone, inputting cranial scanner, data acquisition initiated. But sometimes, Kalen would catch her gaze, A flicker of something beyond protocol, a profound, almost academic curiosity, or perhaps a trace of reluctant pity. Do you find the sensation disruptive, human? She'd asked once, after a particularly aggressive neural sweep. Kellen had just grunted. Feels like someone's flossing my brain with a rusty wire, but hey, you do you? A small, almost imperceptible ripple of gold passed over her skin at his sardonic humor. Your species uses an unusual number of idioms to convey distress. It's how we cope, Kalen shrugged. Makes the misery go down easier. This forced proximity was a strange dance. Kalen, the cynical survivor, used humor as a defense. Zelira, the ritual-bound heiress, used formal language and cultural stoicism. But the barrier between them, once impenetrable, began to thin. Kalen started observing her own subtle shifts, the faint green shimmer when a council emissary was particularly demanding, the deep violet when she was lost in thought. Studying ancient Syrinx texts, he even saw a fleeting, almost imperceptible orange when she seemed amused. He suspected it was when he accidentally knocked over his meal synth plate. She hadn't reacted, hadn't even flinched, but the orange had been there, brief as a pulse. It was a fascinating contradiction to her outward stoicism. The council's patience, always a thin veneer, finally snapped. Silira entered his chamber, her luminous skin pulsing with a rapid, uneven cerulean, a clear sign of agitation. The Elder Council has rendered their final decree regarding your disposition, human, she announced, her voice pitched slightly higher than usual, though she maintained her formal posture. You are to undergo the resonance binding ritual. Kalen felt a cold dread settle in his stomach. He'd overheard hushed whispers of the resonance binding from the few Syrinx who'd inadvertently passed his containment unit, usually accompanied by a shudder or a quick, almost furtive glance in his direction. What is that, exactly? He asked, trying to keep his voice level. It sounds unpleasant. Silira's gaze seemed to pierce him. It is a purification ritual for entities deemed to disrupt the Ether Citadel's harmonic stability. Your essence, as an unregulated resonator, will be either purged or forcibly integrated into the Citadel's core resonance field. Her words were precise, almost clinical, but the rapid shifts of color across her skin, a constant, uneasy swirl of gold, green, and a deeper, troubled violet, spoke volumes. Translation: You're going to try and scrub me out of existence, or turn me into a battery, Kalen said, his voice flat. Is that about right? Zelira was silent for a long moment, her ocular arrays fixed on him. My instructions are to prepare you for the ritual, to ensure the purity of your resonance chamber before the merging process begins. She didn't meet his gaze directly, a subtle sign of evasiveness. You will be transferred to the ancestral chamber, where the ritual will commence in 2 cycles. Kalen pushed himself to his feet. Look, Zelira, I don't know what this resonance binding is, but I'm pretty sure it's bad news for me. Are you going to help me survive this? Or are you just going to stand there and watch them purify me out of existence? Her eyes flickered. My duty is to the Syrinx people, to the Ether Citadel's stability. My role in the ritual is as an administrator of the process, to ensure its proper execution. But the unspoken words hung heavy in the air. Her duty conflicted with a nascent, unacknowledged empathy. So you're just going to follow orders, even if those orders lead to my eradication? Kalen challenged. He saw the struggle in her eyes, the subtle rippling of her skin. There are factions within the council, human. The Vashkri lineage, in particular, views your presence as an affront to their purity doctrines. They advocate for complete obliteration, not integration. Her voice dropped to a lower harmonic, almost a whisper. Their influence on the ritual's outcome will be significant. It was as close to a warning as he was likely to get. All right, Kalen said, a plan beginning to form in his mind. So what's your best guess? What's the best way to integrate without, being turned into a living battery? He saw a flicker of something in her multifaceted eyes, a spark of shared purpose. My understanding of human biological resonance is incomplete, but your species' capacity for adaptation and resilience is well documented. She paused, her gaze intense. Perhaps, if we combine our knowledge, my understanding of Syrinx's ritual, with your messiness. Kalen almost smiled. Sounds like a plan, Eris. The ancestral chamber was not what Kalen expected. It wasn't a sterile lab like his containment unit, nor a grand ceremonial hall. It was a vast, ancient cavern carved into the heart of the Citadel's lowest structure, humid and filled with a faint, earthy scent. Unlike the synthesized air above, intricate glowing patterns, likely resonance pathways, pulsed across the natural rock formations, bathing the space in a soft, ethereal light. In the center, a raised platform of polished stone, etched with complex symbols, waited. It felt like a tomb, or a birthing chamber, or perhaps both. Zalira was already there, divested of her formal robes, clad in a simple form-fitting tunic that revealed the graceful lines of her body and the subtle crystalline formations that traced her limbs and spine. She wore an antique-looking sheath at her hip, containing a slender, ritualistic blade, the Oath Blade, Kalen guessed, having read about it in some of the Syrinx data files he'd been given. This is where the resonance binding occurs, she explained, her voice echoing softly in the cavern. The platform acts as a conduit. It will amplify your innate resonance signature and allow it to be interfaced with the Citadel's core energy field, as well as the presiding ritualists. She gestured to an alcove where two robed figures, members of the Vashkri lineage, stood observing, their faces obscured by deep hoods. They were the corrupted priesthood faction, and Kalen felt their hostile scrutiny like a physical weight. The ritual requires direct contact, human, skin to skin, to facilitate the pulse resonance sync. Kalen felt a jolt. Right. Spanking has a whole new meaning now. He tried for humor, but his voice was tight. It is not spanking, Zalira corrected, her voice firm, but a brief, deep violet pulsed across her skin. It is the fundamental act of merging essence. For us, it is sacred. For you, it may be invasive. She led him to the platform. He lay down, the stone cool against his back. Zalira knelt beside him, her long, delicate fingers tracing a complex pattern on his bare forearm. Her touch was light, yet surprisingly firm, and an unexpected warmth spread through him. He could feel a faint hum, an almost imperceptible vibration emanating from the stone beneath him, rising through his body. You must clear your mind, she instructed, her voice a low harmonic, almost a chant. Release all resistance. Allow your resonance to flow. Kalen wanted to scoff, but the hum was intensifying, a subtle pressure building behind his eyes. He watched her as she placed her hand over his heart, her thumb brushing against his pulse point. A small, almost imperceptible current passed between them. Her crystalline skin glowed faintly. The Vashkri will attempt to exploit your emotional fluctuations, she whispered, her gaze locking with his. They seek to destabilize your resonance. You must anchor it. Imagine a central point within you, unyielding. She paused, then added, almost as an afterthought, this blade, she gestured to the oath blade at her hip, is a symbol of ancestral recognition. It is meant to be activated through shared purpose. The words hung in the air, a silent plea and a subtle offer. Kalen felt the first wave of energy wash over him, a dizzying surge of sensation that made his teeth ache. The Vashkri priests began their own ritualistic chanting, their voices low and guttural, a stark contrast to Zalira's melodic tones. He closed his eyes, focusing on her touch, on the unexpected heat of her hand over his heart. And for the first time, he felt something shift, something beyond fear or cynicism. A connection, nascent and terrifying, began to unfurl between them. The hum intensified, becoming a deafening roar within Kalen's mind, a physical vibration that rattled his bones. The Vashkri's guttural chants grew louder, sharper, pressing in on him, trying to break his mental integrity. He felt as if 1,000 needles were probing his every memory, every fear, every moment of weakness. It was a violation far more profound than any physical torture. Zalira's hand remained pressed against his chest, a lifeline. He could feel her pulse, a rapid, steady beat that resonated with his own frantic heart. Her skin was now a brilliant, unstable kaleidoscope of light, a desperate, internal struggle. "They are attempting to sever your emotional anchors," she whispered, her voice strained, a raw, uncharacteristic edge to her harmonics. "They are attempting to drain your unique energy signature. Do not allow it." He felt a searing pain as if a part of his core was being ripped away. His consciousness fractured, snippets of his past flashing before his eyes, the desolation of a lost colony, the cold indifference of space, the ache of loneliness. This was what the Vashkri wanted, not just to purge him, but to consume his very essence, his resilience, his unregulated emotional energy, perhaps to bolster their own fading resonance core. "Fight them, Kalen." Zalira's voice, sharp and clear, pierced the mental assault, her hand pressed harder against him, and a surge of her own controlled, precise energy flooded into him, a cool, stabilizing current against the inferno. He felt a deep, resonant thrumming begin between them, a shared pulse. It was the pulse resonance sync, but unlike anything either of them had anticipated. Instead of purging him, or him being forcibly integrated, their combined resistance, their desperate will to survive, was creating an unexpected bond. A flash of light erupted from the contact point where her hand met his chest. He saw it, not just with his eyes, but felt it in his mind. A shared vision, brief and startling, a glimpse of her childhood, a moment of profound loneliness in the sterile grand halls of the Citadel, a desperate desire for connection. Then, a shared understanding of the Vashkri's true intent, a desperate attempt to siphon Kalen's energy for their own failing power. "They are consuming," Zalira cried out, a raw, almost guttural sound. "They are not purifying." At that moment, a heavy durasteel door at the far end of the cavern slammed open with a clang. A squad of Vashkri guards, clad in dark, heavy armor, burst in, followed by a high-ranking priest from their lineage, his face a mask of triumphant malice. "The ritual is complete," the priest announced, his voice devoid of compassion. "The anomaly will be contained." He moved towards the platform, intending to physically separate them, to complete the purge by force. Kalen opened his eyes, pain still throbbing, but clarity returning. He saw Zalira, her face etched with a desperate resolve, her luminous skin a chaotic storm of color. Her hand, still covering his heart, trembled. The oath blade, now gleaming with a faint, internal light, was in her other hand. "No," she whispered, her voice now a low, dangerous harmonic. "He is not purged. He is bonded." With a sudden, explosive surge of power, she pushed Kalen away from the platform, just as the guards reached them. He rolled, surprisingly agile, grabbing her hand and pulling her with him into the shadowed recesses of the cavern. The shared resonance, the unexpected fusion of their essences, thrummed between them, empowering her. The oath blade flared, a symbol of their new, unintended, shared purpose. They plunged into the ancient, winding tunnels that snaked beneath the main structures of the Ether Citadel. These were not the pristine, well-lit pathways of the upper city, but forgotten maintenance conduits, rarely used and poorly maintained, choked with dust and disused cabling. Kalen, the seasoned survivalist, moved with an instinctive grace, navigating the crumbling passages. Zalira, despite her unfamiliarity with such crude environments, followed, her innate searing agility adapting quickly. The pulsing glow of her skin was a beacon in the gloom, a stark contrast to the desperate urgency of their flight. "Where are we going?" she asked, her voice tight, echoing in the confined space. "These are forbidden passages. The Elder Council ensures all such access points are sealed." "Well, clearly not well enough," Kalen retorted, his breath ragged. "Or you open them, and we're going wherever they aren't." He paused, listening. The distant shouts of the Vashkri guards reverberated through the rock. "We need to find a place to rest, to figure out our next move, and to understand what just happened back there." He pulled her into a small, relatively clean alcove, hidden behind a tangle of deactivated conduits. The air was thick with the scent of ozone and ancient stone. Zalira leaned against the rough wall, her iridescent skin flickering with a chaotic internal rhythm, her usual composure fractured. My resonance, it is unstable, she confessed, her voice strained. The binding, it was incomplete. But it was not a purge, it was a merging. She looked at him, her multifaceted eyes wide with a new, raw vulnerability. Your essence, it anchored mine. It prevented their extraction. Yeah, and I felt yours too, Kalen said, rubbing his temple. Felt like 1,000 years of dusty emotions and lonely grandeur hitting me all at once. What was that? Your childhood. Zalira flinched, a wave of deep violet washing over her skin. A moment of uncharacteristic vulnerability, an echo of the resonance binding. It is not meant for public consumption. Neither is mine, Kalen said, his gaze softening. We're in this together now, Eris. Your people tried to turn me into a battery, and I tried to not become one. Now we're both fugitives. So, what's your burden? What makes the great Zalira of the Syrinx lineage so lonely? She hesitated, then a slow, almost imperceptible shift of color, a mix of gold and a faint, pale green, crossed her skin. My lineage is ancient, bound by ritual law. I was to be the next resonance keeper, tasked with maintaining the citadel's harmonic balance. It is a life of profound emotional restraint. The needs of the collective outweigh all individual feeling. The Vashkri seek to usurp that role. They claim I am too soft. Now, they have proof. She looked at her hand, which was still faintly glowing. And now I am bound to an anomaly. It is unprecedented. Kalen let out a short, dry laugh. Sounds like a bad arranged marriage. Lucky for you, you're stuck with me now. So, what does a resonance keeper do when her carefully constructed life gets blown to bits? The small alcove, once a temporary refuge, became a sanctuary. Hours bled into days. The desperate flight, having transformed into a forced, intimate encampment within the forgotten bowels of the Aether Citadel. Their injuries, mostly scrapes and bruises from their hasty escape, healed slowly, tended by Kalen with the limited medical supplies he'd scavenged from a disused service drone. The constant thrumming danger of the Vashkri hunt outside their hidden pocket only intensified the space between them, shrinking their world to the shared breath, the hushed whispers, the silent understanding that grew with every passing moment. Zalira, stripped of her formal duties, and surrounded by the raw, unrefined humanity of Kalen, began to shed layers of her own cultural conditioning. Her skin, once a chaotic display of emotion, now pulsed with a more subtle, yet profound series of colors reflecting the deepening shift within her. She was still formal in her speech, but the precision was softened, laced with a nascent curiosity that surprised Kalen. Your humor, she observed one cycle, watching him try to fix a sputtering environmental regulator. It is a coping mechanism, a deflection of distress. Bingo, Kalen said, wiping grease from his brow. You get a gold star, Eris. You're catching on. She watched him, her gaze intense. The spanking in the novel, I now perceive its function. Not as a disciplinary act, but as a symbolic surrender, an inversion of power dynamics, for pleasure. She paused, her iridescent skin flushing a deep, fiery orange. Is that an accurate assessment? Kalen almost dropped the regulator. He turned to her, his eyes wide. Yeah, that's surprisingly accurate. For a Syrinx, he saw the hunger in her eyes, not just for knowledge, but for a deeper understanding of this human messiness that was now irrevocably tied to her own essence. The resonance that had bound them during the ritual thrummed quietly beneath their skin, a constant, low-frequency hum. He felt her emotions, a quiet intensity, a fragile longing, and he knew she felt his. The hidden space was cold, but the air between them was electric. The resonance binding, Zalira began, her voice a low harmonic. It is traditionally a merging of essences for a collective purpose, but when conducted between two singular beings with sufficient resonance, it can lead to a deeper bond, a union. She reached out, her delicate, six-fingered hand hovering inches from his face. Her skin was a brilliant, shimmering cascade of gold and rose. My people conduct rituals of union through pulse resonance sync, but never with an anomaly. You are not an anomaly to me, Kalen. You are a counter-resonance, a balance. Her hand drifted lower, tracing the line of his jaw, then down his neck to his collarbone. Her touch ignited a slow, intense heat in him, a primal pull. The scent of her, clean, ethereal, with a faint, crystalline tang, filled his senses. His breath hitched. Her multifaceted ocular arrays dilated, capturing every flicker of emotion on his face. "This spanking," she whispered, her voice husky, "is it an act of trust, of submission to the partner's will, for shared pleasure?" He swallowed hard. "It can be," he managed, his voice rough. "But it's about far more than just that. It's about letting go, trusting someone with your vulnerability. It's about passion, about being completely open, completely known." Her fingers tangled in his hair, pulling his face gently closer. "I desire to experience this passion, to be completely known by your resonance." She kissed him then, a tentative, almost experimental touch of her soft, cool lips against his. It was unlike any kiss he'd ever known, not just a physical sensation, but a merging of senses, a rush of shared emotion that flowed through their already resonant bond. The hum between them intensified, a deep, vibrating chord that resonated through his very bones. His instincts screamed at him, a desperate need for contact, for release. Her skin flared, a brilliant, almost blinding white, as their bodies pressed together in the intimate, hidden space. He pulled her closer, the soft, firm curves of her body against his. The air crackled around them. Her touch, at first tentative, grew bolder, her hands exploring him with a fierce, almost scientific curiosity that quickly turned to something raw and deeply instinctual. It was a merging of different kinds, not just of physical bodies, but of essences, of cultures, of suppressed emotions, finally given release. The aftershocks of their merging rippled through the small alcove, settling into a profound, almost reverent silence. Kalen lay there, his arm draped possessively around Xylara's waist, her head resting on his chest, feeling the soft, rhythmic thrum of her unique pulse. His own heart felt lighter, a burden lifted, replaced by a deep, resonant calm he hadn't known was possible. This wasn't just physical release. It was a soul-deep intimacy that transcended language and species. Xylara's skin had settled into a soft, steady gold, an emotion Carolyn was beginning to associate with profound contentment and something akin to awe. "That was," she began, her voice a low, melodic purr, "the most profound resonance I have ever experienced. Your unregulated emotions are a force, Kalen, not a contagion, a source of immense power." She shifted, looking up at him, her multifaceted eyes luminous in the dim light. "The elders, they fear this. They fear the raw, untamed nature of true resonance. They seek only to control it, to harness it for their own purposes, not to experience it for its own sake." Her voice turned hard, a rare flash of anger rippling through her skin in streaks of crimson. "The Vashkri seek to drain the Ether Citadel's core resonance, not to bolster it. They were trying to feed on your life force, to replenish their own failing energy from your uncontrolled vitality. They are parasites." Kalen felt a cold dread. "Parasites? How?" Xylara sat up, her eyes blazing with a fierce new determination. "The traditional resonance binding ritual involves a controlled exchange of essence to strengthen the collective, but the Vashkri have corrupted it. They twist the conduits, forcing a one-way siphon. They have been doing this for cycles, discreetly draining the life force of anomalies, those with vibrant, unregulated resonance, under the guise of purification." She pointed to a faint, almost invisible, crystalline pattern embedded in the ancient rock of their alcove. "This chamber, it was once part of the original resonance conduits. Before the corruption, I can feel the pure energy signature here, a faint echo of what the ether citadel should be. The knowledge from the binding, the forced merging, it opens something within me. I can perceive their deception. She rose, her movements precise, her eyes scanning the dark passages. This is not merely a political struggle, Kalen. It is a slow, methodical draining of our people's very lifeblood. They are killing the citadel from within. Her gaze met his, and a new understanding passed between them. We cannot remain hidden. We must expose them. My ancestors would demand it. Kalen looked at her, at the quiet strength in her eyes, at the resolve that now burned in her, a strength that transcended her previous formality. He saw not just an alien heiress, but a fierce, tender woman ready to fight for her people. "All right, heiress," he said, rising beside her. "So, what's the plan? How do we expose a corrupt priesthood in a floating city temple?" She reached for the oath blade at her hip, the blade now pulsing with a steady inner light, reflecting the newly awakened resonance between them. "We seek the ancestral archives. There, the truth of their corruption will be written in the very resonance patterns of time." And then, she met his gaze, her voice imbued with a quiet power. "We challenge them." Their plan was audacious, born of desperation and the strange, unexpected synergy of their merged essences. Zalira, guided by the telepathic echoes of the corrupted resonance binding, found hidden pathways, resonance channels that had been deliberately obscured by the Vashkri. These channels led them deeper into the ether citadel's subterranean levels, to the true ancestral archives, not a dusty library, but a vast network of crystalline structures that recorded the very resonance patterns of Syring's history. It was a place where memories were tangible, where the past vibrated in the air. Kalen, his human senses overwhelmed by the sheer sensory input, relied on Zalira. She, in turn, relied on his grounded presence, his ability to cut through the noise, to identify practical threats and opportunities. They moved like a single entity, the oath blade now glowing with a constant warm light. Held ready, Zalira, with a newfound confidence, projected her intent through the resonance field, causing faint echoes to shimmer around them, unsettling any Vashakri patrols they encountered. They found the damning evidence within the archives, the corrupted resonance signatures, the systematic manipulation of the core energy fields, the proof of the Vashkri's siphoning, not for the Citadel's stability, but for their own extended lifespans and enhanced resonance capabilities, creating an imbalance that threatened to collapse the entire floating city. "This is it," Zalira whispered, her hand tracing a pulsating pattern on a massive crystalline tablet. "The proof. They have been feeding on our future." Armed with this knowledge, they didn't flee. They rose. Zalira, leading the way, broadcast her intent through the Citadel's public resonance channels, a direct challenge to the Elder Council, a demand for a public duel of truth in the Grand Conclave, the most sacred and politically charged arena. The Vashkri, confident in their power and the long-standing tradition of ritual execution for anomalies, accepted, eager to publicly discredit Zalira and finally dispose of Kalen. The conclave was packed, shimmering with the nervous energy of thousands of Syrinx. Kalen stood beside Zalira on the central platform, facing the Elder Council. The Vashkri leader, a towering figure whose skin was almost unnaturally vibrant due to his illicit resonance, sneered. "The heiress Zalira brings an abomination before us, accusing her elders of heresy. This human, a chaotic resonator, has clearly corrupted her judgment." "The corruption lies with you, Elder," Zalira declared, her voice ringing with a clear, powerful harmonic that resonated through the chamber, silencing the murmurs. Her skin pulsed with a steady, brilliant white. "My resonance is not corrupted. It is broadened, and it has revealed your treachery." She presented the evidence from the archives, not through words but by projecting the resonance signatures, the damning patterns of deception, directly into the conclave's shared consciousness. Many of the Syrinx gasped as they experienced the truth, the subtle but undeniable distortion of the Vashkri's resonance, the slow, insidious drain. "This human," Zalira continued, gesturing to Kalen, her hand clasping his, was to be your next victim, but his unregulated resonance, combined with mine in a corrupted binding, revealed the truth of your parasitic rituals. He anchors a new truth, elders, a truth of shared vitality, not stolen essence. Carolyn, feeling the collective shift in the Syrinx's resonance, stepped forward. You call me an abomination, he said, his voice quiet but carrying surprising weight. But the only abomination here is stealing life for your own benefit. Your way is collapsing, elders. You can either learn to resonate with the universe or fade away. The Vashkri leader roared, charging forward, activating his own corrupted resonance, intending to physically overpower Zalira. But she met him, not with a weapon, but with the combined force of their new resonance. The oath blade in her hand flared, Kalen's own life force flowing into it through their shared connection, creating a protective barrier, deflecting the attack. The elder, weakened by his own parasitic nature and the exposure of his crimes, crumpled, his vibrant skin dulling to a sickly gray. The rest of the Vashkri faction recoiled, their power broken. The conclave erupted in a cacophony of sound, a mix of shock, fear, and a dawning understanding. Zalira stood tall, the oath blade held high, her hands still clasped in Kalen's, a silent testament to their unexpected and undeniable bond. The immediate aftermath was chaotic. The Vashkri were apprehended, their resonant siphoning abilities exposed and contained. The Ether Citadel, once a symbol of rigid tradition, now hummed with a new, uncertain energy. Zalira, by right of lineage and the undeniable evidence of her courage and wisdom, stepped into her role as resonance keeper. But with a profoundly different vision for her people, she immediately initiated reforms, dismantling the corrupt practices, re-establishing true resonance with the Citadel's core, and promoting open emotional expression over rigid restraint. It was a long road, but the Syrinx, witnessing the near collapse of their society and the clear evidence of the Vashkri's corruption, were ready for change. Kalen remained by her side, not as a prisoner, nor as an anomaly, but as her partner. His presence, once a threat, was now seen as a bridge. His grounded nature, his practical problem-solving, his dry humor, which Zalira now understood and even, occasionally reciprocated with her own brand of dry wit, became invaluable. He helped her navigate the practicalities of governance, while she guided him in understanding the deeper intricacies of Syrinx resonance and culture. He became her informal envoy to the newly formed Interspecies Liaison Council, a body Zalira established to prevent future isolationist policies. Their bond was now openly acknowledged, a new kind of bond mark forged not by ancient ritual, but by shared trauma, mutual guardianship, and a love that defied all conventional understanding. It was a quiet, profound devotion, woven into the very fabric of their daily lives. One evening, as the Ether Citadel glowed with the soft, balanced light of a healthy resonance core, Zalira found Kalen on one of the newly opened observation decks, gazing out at the swirling gas clouds of the giant planet below. Her skin pulsed with a gentle, contented gold. The core resonance is stable, she observed, moving to stand beside him. The Citadel is thriving. Kalen nodded, a faint smile on his lips. Good. You're doing a hell of a job, Eris. I am not merely Harris anymore, Kalen. I am Keeper, and I am yours. She reached for his hand, intertwining her delicate six-fingered digits with his. Her gaze, warm and direct, met his. You anchored me. You showed me that emotion is not weakness. That true resonance is in connection, not control. She paused, a rare, almost shy smile touching her lips. And your spanking references, I now understand them not as crude illusions, but as expressions of a profound, raw vulnerability and trust. Kalen chuckled, pulling her closer. Glad to know I'm still teaching you new tricks. What else does that romance novel say? Zalira's skin rippled with a playful, teasing violet. It speaks of a happily ever after. Is that a realistic human expectation? Kellen leaned down, pressing a kiss to her shimmering brow. With you, Zalira, anything is possible. the unspoken promise of their future, rich with shared purpose and quiet affection, settled between them, a resonance of their own.